is recording.
Greetings, everyone. I am Daniel Mezick
I am Ann Brea.
and Brea, and we are both here to discuss. We are here to praise the 1 week sprint in minimal Scrum. I'm not quite sure what we call this, but I'm going to show you something that's been working really, really well.
And I want to add that this also creates flow. So we will be talking about is an opportunity to create flow for a number of different reasons.
Yeah. And I'm going to share my screen. I should give my background. I've been doing this stuff, Agile coaching since 2006, if you can believe that. And I've been coaching executives in their teams since about 2012. I also am party to either authoring or co-authoring 3 separate books. I wrote the first book in 2012, The Culture Game, Tools for the Agile Manager. I wrote a second book called with co-authors called The Open Space Agility Handbook in 2018. And then in 2016, I wrote that. And then in 2018, I wrote with Mark Sheffield the book called Inviting Leadership, which described how to mix delegations and invitations in your leadership style to solicit volunteers, right, to increase engagement. So that's a little bit about me. Okay, so more recently, my colleague Ann has become credentialed in Pro Kanban as a trainer. Isn't that correct, Ann?
Correct. Yes. I'm a Pro Kanban trainer and have been for 2, 3, I think coming up on 3 years now.
Yeah, and Ann and I have known each other for over a decade, and she's helped out with Agile Boston, I think, for almost that long. Right?
Yep.
So that's the story. And then the more recent thing is that I found myself coaching for an international consumer products company in the Western Hemisphere, so North America, South America, Central America, and there's no engineering teams at all. They're all business teams, sales, marketing, or supporting functions like finance and legal. Okay, so I found out right away that these folks don't have any appetite at all for the traditional Agile playbook. The traditional playbook is we give them training. The training has theory and terminology. I call it the 3 T's: training, theory, terminology. They don't want any of that. Everybody in this company has 3 or 4 jobs, and they just want to get results right away. And that's all they care about. So I punted on the regular playbook, and I'm going to describe to you what we ended up doing and how well it worked, okay? And then when you leave the session, you should have some good ideas about how you can do the exact same things with your engineering teams or your business teams, right? So the goal of
Any
this,
teams. I just want to add to any team.
yeah, any team, and especially executive teams, right? Okay, so let's get into it. I'm going to share my screen, show some slides, talk them through. Ann's going to provide a little bit of commentary and maybe some teaching as well as we go along. And let's take a look at this. I'm going to share the screen. And I think you have to make me special.
Oh, how do I do that?
I'm going to send a request to, and that should
just right click on Dan and make co-host.
All right. So now you got me. So now I should be able to share, and voila. Okay, so here we go. We're going to talk about Pareto's Law, which is the 80-20 rule. And we are going to discuss exactly what it takes to get real traction. And it's a lot less than I thought. And I want to tell you something. As I do the Agile coaching, I continue to marvel at how I continue to learn things and change my beliefs. But things I used to think were true, I don't think are true anymore. It seems like this is always happening to me. So I want to kind of just let you know that I've been continuously learning as I've gone through this stuff. All right, so we all know this. This is a Scrum diagram. It's got the rules, the roles, the artifacts, the events. We know how it goes. This is a regular playbook for Scrum, right? All right. So I already told you they have no appetite for theory, training, or terminology, right? So here's what we did. The basic recipe works like this. No 2-week sprints. We do 1-week sprints. Those 1-week sprints are led by a single product owner. That's non-negotiable, still part of core Scrum. We use a Kanban for the backlog, and I'm going to show you some creativity things that they did with the Kanban when I encouraged them to do so. Each week, there's 30 minutes of backlog refinement. 30 minutes a week. It's nothing. And then we have a 1-hour meeting that has 25 minutes of sprint review, where we move the Kanban cards from in process to done. We have 10 minutes of what did we learn this week that we can use to get better this week and in the weeks to come. 10-minute retrospective, 10 minutes. Okay. And then 25 minutes of sprint planning, where we move cards into the in process column and load it up for the next week. Okay, so that's the recipe, the basic recipe. What's not
Can I
included?
ask Daniel, can we go back? Because I'd like to ask the group a couple of questions along the lines. So I want to go to the 30 minutes of backlog refinement per week. And I want to ask the people on the call, how many times have you either been on a team or worked with a team where you spent time refining stories that never got worked on? Has anyone had that experience?
Yeah.
Everyone? We've got people in the chat. Great. Thank you for responding in the chat. So that's one of the ways, creating this focus then reduces the work not done, or eliminates, in some ways starts to eliminate, but reduces the work not done. And I want to kind of point out the same with sprint planning. Have you worked with teams where you're in planning and you're planning 2 weeks or sometimes 4 weeks out, and the stuff at the end, that stuff sort of, we prioritize our backlog for sprint planning, and the stuff at the bottom, we talk about it, we plan on it, but things came up, other work took longer than we expected, and we never got to that stuff. So that
Mm-hmm.
time, I mean, it might have been 10 minutes, but 10 minutes every 2 weeks for the whole total number of people on the team. So just kind of want to share some of those points and experiences that you might have had, as Daniel shows what worked for him. So
Yeah. Now, when we do 2-week sprints, a lot of times what happens in the first week is nothing. People get busy at the end because there's a deadline. So we're wasting a week. And you got something there?
yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, we also have a tendency as human being, I want to kind of add that as human beings, we have this tendency of, if this is the amount of work time that we're planning on that's in our head is 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
the work expands to that amount of time, and we kind of think about it and get ready for it at the beginning, and then we have this mad dash at the end, which is going back to some of the Scrum principles, that's not really sustainable. So that everyone at the last few days of the sprint, it's this mad dash, this rush to get everything done, and then you have it done and it's like, so the beginning of the next sprint, we're catching our breath. So that's where some of this work is not sustainable, which is not aligned to the real principles of Scrum. I also kind of want to add and remind everyone, right? So
Yep. So hold on just a second.
So does anyone else experience that even with the 2-week sprint, which we think in theory, like that's really short, right? But have you experienced that with the 2-week sprint as well? Anyone you can add to the chat. Yes, totally. Nice. Thank you. Thank you.
So the 1-week sprint is a kind of constraint that generates movement and progress and focus and energy around going through the process. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. It's an hour and a half of meeting support per week for a 1 week sprint. Now let's take a look at what's not included. No daily scrum. Why? People are all over the world. They're in different time zones. They have different holidays. Plus, we have things like Slack or Teams for anything we need to do. Sometimes we'll do a daily. I tried getting a daily thing going on Teams. It didn't fly. So we just dropped the daily scrum. No estimates. We don't do estimates. They can't even spell the word. Okay. And I'll talk more about how that they wind up kind of sizing things on, because they have to, but I don't do any of that. And then there's no training, no terminology, no theory whatsoever. Okay.
Daniel, I have a question about the no terminology. We're in this talk, we're talking about 1 week sprints. Do you use the word sprint, at least when you started with this group, or did you just say we're going to work in 1 week, I don't know, cycles or?
I say the I word. I call them iterations.
Ah,
And
nice.
then we don't say Scrum Master, we say Scrum Lead. Oh, there's also no Scrum Master. I mean, I'm the coach, right? So I just function as sort of the coachy person. And but the only defined role is there's two defined roles: the team, all the people in the teams, and the product owner. Okay, and there is no Scrum Master per se. Why? Because you ain't gonna need it in a 1 week sprint.
Can
Okay.
you say that you're not officially doing Scrum?
Yeah, we're not officially doing Scrum. I call it inspired by Scrum. All right. And I give them a link to the Scrum guide if they want to learn more about this, but that's as far as I go with terminology and theory. Okay. All right. So you're going to see, like, how can this work? I'm going to tell you how. I promised the teams, because I'm parachuting in because some executive says you're going to go help these people, right? The reality is that they didn't choose it. So what I say to them is, "Hi, I'm Dan. I was sent by Christopher. Um, I've got a new way of working. I want you to try it for 4 or 5 weeks, and then I want you to drop it like a bad habit if it's not working. How's that sound? And then you can show me the door. You can politely send me to the exit doors and bid me well. You can be kind and polite, but you can still boot me out at the end of 5 weeks if there's no good results. What do you think of that?" And they go, "Oh, that sounds pretty good." The people who are pro are already saying yes. The people who are skeptical are sharpening their knives for the meeting we're going to have at the end of the 5 weeks when we review everything. And they're like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna shred this guy when it's over." Right? Here's the really key point. I promise them tangible results that are measurable in 4 or 5 weeks maximum. That's 4 or 5 sprints. In return for that promise, I need them to suspend their disbelief. I want them to pretend that everything I say is true. And I want them to act as if this can work. I also have an absolutely mandated requirement that the stakeholders are present at the weekly review. This slide is the most important takeaway of the entire hour. Okay. They need to play along and not resist. They need to actively support. They need to show up for the backlog refinement. They need to show up for the review and the planning. The stakeholder needs to show up for the review. And if all those things are true, okay, then we're doing this. Otherwise, we're not. And that's the deal. I'm asking them for their authorization. And I want them to play along. And at the end of the 4 or 5 weeks, they can tell me to leave if they're not having any fun. And oh, by the way, I do pitch the idea that this thing is supposed to be fun. If it's not fun, let's actually not do it. Oh, guess what? Winning is fun. Being productive is fun. Making traction is fun. Let's go do those things. How about that? Okay. So this is a deal that I make with them. This is the most important slide of the entire talk. The rules. I promise tangible results and I'm not bluffing. But the following things have to be true for us to get there. I need them to agree. Anybody have a question or comment on that? You can put it in the chat, okay? All right. So what's really going on? We get absolute alignment on what we're doing and why and for how long. Okay. We have urgency. Why? Because there's not enough time in a week. So the first couple sprints are kind of messy. They're kind of bumpy. They're kind of like you don't want to really look at them. They're not beautiful. Okay. There's much more flow because you're going week to week instead of month to month or every 2 weeks or whatever. And then the stakeholder participation is what's driving the results, because we're constantly getting feedback from the stakeholders. Now, that has two dynamic aspects. The first one is practical. We're getting feedback from the horse's mouth every single week with no exceptions, okay? Nobody's guessing. Second thing is the stakeholders are usually authority figures. They usually have a lot of people reporting to them. They usually control budgets. They are important people. If the important people are here at our review, what must that mean about us? What must that mean about our work? Okay. And Joe, hey, Joe, we're not keeping you up, are we? All right, I'm just checking in. Just checking in on you, Joe. Okay, so there's a psychological aspect and there's a practical aspect to stakeholders being present every single week. If the stakeholders don't show up every single week, I jack them up and I tell them what I just told you.
Daniel, I have a kind of logistical curiosity about that with summer holidays coming in. Do you do your weeks for like Monday to Friday, or does it, I'm curious if like summer holidays or vacations kind of impact your cycle, and I'm wondering how maybe you might work around that or
We might move the meetings around to accommodate holidays or people that are on travel or something like that. We record the meetings, so the stakeholder can look at it, but that is a distant second to the stakeholder being there. If the stakeholder can't be there at the regular time, we'll move it to a different time or a different day so they can.
nice,
All right.
nice.
Because it's so important for
Mhm.
those two reasons, the psychological and the practical. Okay. All
Thank you.
right. So this is the thing I already told you. All right. So here's what usually happens. The coach, that's me, can be hardcore about the process. I can just say, no, don't do it that way. Do it this way instead. The first couple of sprints are bumpy and messy. A common pattern is during backlog refinement, they start doing the review. Or during the review, they start doing the planning. Or during the planning, they start doing backlog refinement. We separate those three concerns: backlog refinement, planning, review. They're separate. We do one, then we do the other, then we do the other. So the 1 hour meeting goes review, 10 minutes of retrospective, planning. And we're looking at the Kanban the whole time. Now, what happens is they immediately figure out the link between a good backlog and great results. So often what happens is they realize 30 minutes isn't really long enough in a week for the backlog refinement, and they voluntarily go to 1 hour. It's a kind of a planning prep. We call it pre-planning instead of backlog refinement, okay? Then they start asking questions about like, this isn't supposed to work. Why is it working? And now we got them because they're asking theory questions. They're asking, and you can introduce terminology. You can teach them. But in the beginning, we just throw them in the deep end of the pool and we do the basic structure that I just laid out, okay? This actually works amazing. So the executives are like amazed. Like I get comments from the executives like, we would never be where we are today with our old process. This process is so much better. Okay. And the results are tangible. We're making deliveries like frequently, stuff's getting delivered. We're also identifying impediments and starting to like reduce them or remove them. And resistance to the process starts to look kind of dumb. Because the process is actually working by the third or the fourth week. It's working good because they've already been through a couple iterations and they know how it goes. So the team will usually mix up to 2 meetings, and this is the thing that I told you before. That's just a repeated slide.
So Daniel, okay, so I'm kind of hearing and curious about if I'm hearing it correctly. So it was that kind of mixing up of the meetings. Some of that sounds like teaching this group what the rules of the game is. Or what the rules of the game, sorry, I want to use correct English, what the rules of the game are.
Are,
What
yeah,
are the correct rules, and helping them. I mean, at the beginning, when we start something new, we don't do it correctly, and sharing with them, that's part of, I'm imagining that's part of the opportunity that, hey, we've got to learn this. We've never done it before. We're not going to do it right the first time.
that's right. So the 1 hour, go ahead. What else?
And well, I was just gonna say, so I'm hearing, I want to reconnect to the fun that we were talking about at the beginning. So
Mhm.
here's that kind of teaching, these are the rules of this game. And then there's also that I'm also seeing potential for the opportunity as people learn the starting rules. Now we can start to change the rules with our review process. Like what's
That's right.
working well for us? What
That's
wasn't?
right.
I heard you say at the beginning you tried dailies, so maybe the daily was part of the original rules, and they said,
Yeah,
no, this isn't working for us. Oh, let's throw that out now. But
right.
it's a collective. We're playing this game together now, and we're
That's true.
working to find what is winning for us, what is
And
success, what is.
that's right. That's right. Yes, and what you say to him is you quote like Martin Fowler, teams should be in control of their own process. That's why we're going to review this in 5 weeks. Okay. And then what you do is you teach them, like during backlog refinement, you say things like, the purpose of this meeting is for everyone to understand the cards ahead of the planning. Are there any cards here that are not well understood or might be a little bit too big or something like that? Let's work on them. But the goal of the meeting is for everyone to understand the cards before we do the planning. And sometimes we finish early, sometimes we don't. Okay. Now I'm going to show you something that they do. They do it with the Kanban. Okay. So I'm going to show this other document. I just kind of put it in a Word doc. I didn't put it on a slide because I kind of added it at the last minute. But I'm going to share this. I don't know. This is kind of maybe hard to read, but can you see this? These are the column headings for the Kanban. So backlog is all the cards. Priority is the cards that are gonna like be prioritized for the next planning. So they put the priority cards here. So the cards start in backlog, and they get moved to priority. And then during the planning, we move them from priority to in process. This column right here, we call it blocked or too big. So cards that are just too big to finish in a week, we drop them over here, and we eventually break them down during refinement. Okay. And then the done column. And then one of my teams started doing this. They started putting cards in the out months like July, August, and September. Like, well, we should do this around here. They're starting to make a timeline out of the Kanban. So the Kanban is it's a breath mint and a candy mint. It's a Kanban board and it's a kind of timeline all in one deal. And then when June expires, we take the July cards and we just move them into this backlog column. And then priority and process blocked and big are empty, and then we work that again. So this is like a magnification of the current month, and the Kanban columns are actually some of the months in the future. I just let them do that, and they just did really well with that stuff. Okay, so that's how they're using the Kanban, and I did not invent that. They came up with that on their own.
Dan, on the block state, without a daily scrum, how does the team get rid of blocked items and get them to the next state?
What I do is I teach them that the blocked items are that we have to eliminate or reduce them, and commonly we have a person to do that called the Scrum Master or the Scrum Lead, and we discuss like how can we reduce this impediment. So, for example, things that are blocked in big companies. I need to say this now. Okay, in big companies, everyone has 3 or 4 jobs. Okay, no one has any time. The prioritization discipline is usually pretty weak. So if you don't do 1 week sprints, they're going to take the whole first 3/4 of that 2 weeks, they're going to use it for something else. And then they're going to get busy in the last 4 days of the sprint, right? So with impediments, what we do is there's certain impediments in companies, like the classic one is legal. Anything that goes to legal goes into a black hole and it comes out 3 or 4 weeks later, right? So we figured out, okay, we're not going to reduce this, we're not going to eliminate this impediment, but how can we reduce the legal latency? And we figured out, does anyone here know someone in legal? Yes. Oh, how do you know them? Oh, I know them this way. Okay, could you call them or email them and tell them that, like, next week we're going to drop something on their lap and we'd like them to, be aware that it's coming because we want them to expedite it. We were able to reduce the legal latency from like 4 weeks to 2 weeks that way because they were kind of ready for it. They kind of pre-processed it a little bit and they were kind of, and then we followed through and did what we were supposed to do. We delivered it on time and they were ready to take care of it. Most of the latency in legal is like,
They don't know it's coming.
yeah, it's caused by lack of urgency. So if we show up urgent and go, look, I don't want to like drop a hot potato in your lap, but in 2 weeks we're going to send this thing to legal. Could you like get on it as soon as it comes in? Well, what is it? Where is it? How is it? When now we're talking about the work before, so that actually works out pretty good. But impediment removal,
Has
like
legal
kind of
started to get curious about the process that you all are doing? I mean, that would be super cool, is if legal starts to say, hey, how are you on top of all this stuff? Can we use any of it? Will it apply to us? At some point, maybe they'll start to get curious and the ideas will spread.
That's correct. So 80% of your results are coming from the things I've already described. So if you're doing backlog refinement, if you're doing the review, if you're doing the planning, if you're doing the retrospective in the middle, if you have a product owner, you're going to do okay. And if you have a Kanban, you're going to do better. And if you have a 1 week sprint, you're going to do better. So that's the recipe that I'm using with business teams. And hey, guess what? It actually works. All right. Tightening the time constraints creates focus and creativity. Okay. So when you have less money, when you have less time, you have to get creative. That's what they do. And then showing tangible results quickly creates demand for training, terminology, and theory. So what I want to say here is theory, terminology, and training does not create results. It doesn't do anything. It bores people. What they really want to do is something exciting, like get traction. Okay. So winning with your team without knowing what you're doing and having a coach to guide you is actually fun. And I make fun of the team sometimes. I'm like, you're getting it all over yourself. You're kind of making a mess. That's okay. And I tell them it's supposed to be bumpy. It's supposed to be messy in the first couple sprints. Don't worry about it. Just relax into it. But we get to the third sprint, bing, bang, boom, bing, bang, boom. And oh, by the way, some of the teams that I'm coaching have Spanish as their primary language, and it's not an impediment. You want me to tell you why? Because during the review, I show up in English, and then I tell them, now do the review step in Spanish. Just go all the way with Spanish. And then when you're done, tell me. And then they just do the whole thing in Spanish. And then I go, okay, have we reviewed all the cards? Have we moved everything done that can be done? Yes. Okay. Now let's do the retrospective. What do we learn? What do we know this week that we didn't know last week? Let's have that conversation in Spanish. And then they go off in Spanish for 10 minutes. So it actually really, really works. Okay, these are just pictures that I don't need. But what I want to do is I want to go back to the beginning. All of this is actually more than you need to get results. Now, once you get results with this, all of a sudden, they want to know about, like, hey, there's more to this, isn't there? I'm like, oh yeah, there's a lot more. They're like, well, what can we work on now? I'm like, well, you could work on your prioritization. You'd have to estimate the effort to do that. And then you'd also have to estimate the value, and you'd have to divide the value by the effort to find out what should be going to the top. Oh, okay. And I went on the web. I learned about this Fibonacci sequence and the planning poker. And what's that all about? I want to know about that. And then they're like, oh, this learning thing we do that's in the middle between the review and the planning, that's actually like supposed to be the retrospective, right? I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what that is, you know. And all of a sudden, they're keenly interested in improving. So we start to talk about work and process limits, WIP limits. Like, you ever notice when you do 8 things, you slow down, but if you keep it to like maybe 4 or 5 things, you actually maintain a steady pace? They're like, yeah, I notice that around my house too. If I have too much going on in the yard, I don't get any of it done. Have you ever gone out in your shed and you're going for the lawnmower, but there's a rake on top of the lawnmower and there's other stuff on top of the lawnmower, and you take it off and then you realize there's a
Lawnmower's out of gas and you can't get to the
yeah,
gas can.
yeah,
And then when
yeah.
you do, you realize it's empty.
Yeah. There's all this stuff all at the mouth of the shed in front of the door, and you haven't done anything yet. You initially were showing up to cut the grass, but the grass never got cut. So there's all of this that's going on. So what I'd like to do now is kind of have a conversation and maybe open it up to some questions and hear what people think about this. Now, I want to be really clear about this. I go in with total confidence that I can deliver tangible results that people will be happy with in 5 weeks or less, 5 iterations or less. I have absolutely no hesitation with that because I know that I have the goods. But I need them to play along. The stakeholder needs to be there each week. We have to have these 90 minutes of meetings each week. And we have to separate those concerns among those meetings. And then we're going to get traction. Oh, and the definition of done is actually a big part of this. So every card is in a primitive state until we have a defined definition of done, which is like 80% of ready. Okay. If we have a done definition, we can see that the card is too big. And we can break it down smaller. If we have a done definition, we can notice what's missing and we can add it. Okay. And then when we do the review, we always go to the done definition. And we don't work any cards that don't have a done definition. That's part of the rules. Okay. So this is actually working amazing, and people are totally happy with this. And I hear things from people like, I can't imagine working any other way. This is so much better than what we were doing before. And by putting them in charge of their process, like having this referendum at the end of 4 or 5 weeks, they're way happier. Way happier. Okay, so Ann, you want to add something here?
I feel like you've said so much. Oh, Christoph, please.
Yeah, I think everything you said totally applies to my reference frames and everything. I guess there is something generic about it. So you now took Scrum as your playground, so to speak, and you offered it to those people. But actually, what I see is whenever we offer a very structured process, regardless of what that process is, this is something that people do not know. For some unknown reasons, it's all meetings are chaotic. They have an agenda, but no one cares, etc., etc. They takes longer than the time frame, etc. So if you start talking about time frame, start talking about structured process, what comes first, what comes next, what is the actual topic that we're talking about, this is what makes people happy. And in your case, it is a very reduced Scrum something, but it would work the very same way and make people happy with many other processes that help.
Yeah, you need specifically, you need clear roles, right? So we discussed how the structure for the roles is that the product owner owns the prioritization. Anybody who wants to influence priority must address the product owner, right? And all of this. So basically what I'm saying is I used to believe you needed more and now I don't. Because, and that thing that you said about the group, I think if you investigate crowd psychology, group psychology, like there's a book called The Crowd by Gustave Le Bon. It was written in 1895. It's available as a free PDF on the web. The book is called The Crowd, and the author is Gustave, Gustav, Le Bon, Lebon. And he talked about how mobs and crowds have a primitive emotional life. So there's something that happens when you get in a group where we could actually reduce our IQ without the structure, right? But if you have the structure, then we can, maintain our IQ or even increase it. So that's a whole other universe of teaching that you've opened up. But there's definitely something there. We need structure in groups if we're gonna get traction. Absolutely, yes.
So there's
And
a couple of questions in chat.
that's what I was
So
just
you
gonna.
get those, yeah, and please go ahead.
Well, I was gonna add, Daniel, so I noticed that there's a question from Ken. What do you do / have done regarding estimates? Do you use story points, task estimates, anticipated effort and hours? And I want to share, Daniel and I are going to answer this question differently, very differently.
Yeah, you want me to go first? You want to go second?
You can go first, yeah.
All right. So as far as estimates go, here's the only thing that I do with them. I don't even introduce estimates as a thing. So there's no daily scrum, there's no estimates. I don't even talk about it. But here's what I do talk about. Don't put too much work in the in-process column during planning. Only put in the stuff that you can finish. Do not overload the in-process. Are any of those cards in process kind of big? Can we break some of them in half and maybe do half of that? Why? Because Jeff Sutherland's paper, teams that finish early accelerate faster, is totally true. When people finish and clear the in-process column, they actually can double their throughput within a couple of sprints. But if things spill over, it dampens the whole vibe of completion and success and progress.
Well, it makes us feel like we've lost the game. Like I want to
Yeah,
bring it back to the game theory and the fun, and that feels like, oh, we lost that round, and that's not as much fun.
yeah. And the Scrum culture is we finish what we start. Okay, so when that happens, what happens is that team is now working from usually a different set of values than the rest of the company. Okay, the rest of the company is tolerating the spillover, but this team isn't. All right, so that has an effect. After a while, they start to express frustration with the external world that they depend on. Okay, and it starts to change the culture if there's multiple teams that are at that spot where they're finishing. If they're finishing their sprints, they start to become like kind of junkies for progress, right? Because they're like, wow, this was like really interesting. This really feels awesome. Look at all that, pardon my friend, all the shit we got done this week, right? And then they realize that they shouldn't be planning what they don't think they can finish. They should only plan what they think they can finish. So that comes later usually. Go ahead, Ann, what was it?
Well, and I was gonna share that with my Kanban kind of training as I've gone through my process. I kind of mentioned earlier when Daniel had stepped away that I used story points were something that I used to talk to teams about, and let's do story points. And I'm now a big believer. I'm gonna borrow from Ryan Ripley and Todd Miller. Story points are trash. And what I want to, that's to get the shock value because it's fun, but I want to share a little more detail in that. And the reason that I say that is the amount of time spent talking about, is this a 3 or a 5?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I want to tell you something about that. They are medicating with estimation. Okay.
Mm.
Here's what's really going on. People do not like the uncertainty, and people are allergic to uncertainty. So the estimate, even if it's invalid and wrong, gives the sense of certainty. And that's what people really want. Can I tell you a story about this?
Sure.
One team I was coaching was taking a really, really, really long time to estimate this one story. They were a new team I was coaching, an engineering team. And I noticed that they were going to take like half an hour, 45 minutes, or even an hour to finish this estimation because they just had to get it just right. You know what I mean? And they were going back and forth and back and forth. And it was a total waste of time. But I had been coaching for about 5 years at that point, and I realized that this is actually good for them because they're going to get frustrated, and then they're going to listen to me after the break when I offer them a solution. So sure enough, I said, oh, here comes our break. They had been on this one story for an hour, and I just let them. Because I was more mature as a coach. I just let them. They all went out. They all came back in. I said, boy, that was kind of painful, wasn't it? They're like, oh, hell yeah. I'm like, you guys want to go faster? They're like, yes, please. I'm like, okay. And I put a shot clock at the front of the table, 5 minutes. Oh, I think we did 10 minutes the first time. 10 minutes. We're going to do a story in 10 minutes. And oh, by the way, 99% of all estimates are wrong. So why don't we just be wrong faster? And they all laughed nervously. And then they went through the process with me. And they finished that story in 10 minutes. And I said, you want to do another one in 10 minutes? Remember, all estimates are wrong. So let's be wrong faster. Want to do 10 minutes again? They're like, yeah. Well, the next one they finished in like 7 minutes. Then one of the troublemakers on the team goes, let's try 5. And then they got a whole bunch of stories done 5 minutes each. Okay. So all estimates are usually wrong. So why don't we just be wrong faster? In fact, if we take the two extremes, all we really need to know is how much can we get done this week? I mean, really, that's about it. So, but estimates are important. Why? Metrics, measurement.
Well, there are other ways of
I know there's other
doing that
ways.
also, but I want to, I want to share with this group. Here's a group of Scrum Masters, coaches. All of you. I want to point out. I just started by saying story points are trash, but I want to share that the knowledge that what Daniel was bringing up, that for this team, feeling the pain of wasting their time doing story points
Yes,
has a
yes,
lot of value, has a
yes,
ton of value. And
yes.
I've kind of gone through that. I've seen that opportunity. So that's where I'm coming from today. That doesn't mean that a team that I'm working with who wants to do story points, I would start by saying story points are trash. Daniel's story is an awesome opportunity, to share. Let's help the team meet the teams and the people that we're working with where they are, understand where they are, where are they in their journey, and help them make the next couple of steps forward in their journey. I mean, that's success for us, and that's how we can help the teams the best. And there's my martial arts reference, Joe, for you. That's a martial
Yeah.
arts. It's a martial arts thing. Let's, where are we all?
Yeah.
And having empathy and helping them along their journey, wherever that is, to a common goal, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe we have different views, and that's also okay.
So in summary, for me, the main thing is do whatever it takes to get them results as quick as possible, because that is what's going to power everything, especially the authorization from the executives. So I'm not doing estimates. Hey, guess what? The executives don't care. Why? Because they see traction being achieved.
Well, and the team is taking in work that they can complete in a week. That makes it small.
And they're
Helps
finishing
to
it.
create, right. And that helps to create, they're learning how to create small pieces of work that can flow through their process.
That's
So
it.
and
Yeah.
there's some of the value.
Yeah, executives don't care about points, they care about results. And points aren't results, as you come to find out. There's a couple more questions in chat that are really good. Chris asked a really good question. What kind of improvements come from a 10-minute retro?
A lot of improvements come from a 10-minute retro. What's a retro? What's the purpose of the retro? It's to improve, isn't it? Okay, so how can you improve without learning? So by rephrasing the retro as a review of learning, learning becomes the focus. What did we learn? So they start to think, what am I learning now? So they can bring that to the 10-minute retro. And a lot of times what they learn is that the the delays and the roadblocks aren't inside the team. Okay, that's something they figure out. When they get good at this, they realize, okay, we've eliminated most of the impediments that we can control, but the ones we can't control still exist. So what happens with the 10-minute retro is we find actionable learning in the discussion about what was learned. So when they say, oh, I learned this, my next question is, how can we exploit that in the next sprint? How can we take full advantage of it? Okay, maybe not the next sprint. What about the one after it, right? Well, if we can't use it to improve, it's not the most valuable learning. So what I'm really asking them, how can we improve? But it's an indirect question, right? What do we learn, right? So the short answer is you can get a boatload out of a 10-minute conversation. And oh, by the way, there's usually up to a 45-minute pregnant moment of silence before anybody says what the learning was. And then one person talks and then they all, blah, 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 blah. But it takes a long time. Don't interrupt it. Just let it hang out there. And then someone will sort of be the first one to talk after a while because they're processing the past week in their mind.
Daniel, I'm imagining the reference that you made to the learning about legal and the time it took to legal. Did that come up sort of in your retros? Is that an example of some of the the results of retros, or did that come up in another way?
The entire process is a conversation. Refinement's a conversation. Review is a conversation with feedback with the stakeholder. Same thing with planning. It's all a conversation. Remember, the team is the one who is selecting what goes in the sprint, not the product owner. So the product owner might only put a limited number of cards in the prioritized column. I tell them, don't do that. Just put them in prioritized order, at least like half of the cards that are in the backlog column, and let the team pull it off. That's the top of your backlog. But don't give them this many cards. That's like telling them that's your next sprint. Give them way more cards than they need so they can compose their own sprint. Okay, let me answer this other question. Do teams involved in 1 week sprints have a single stakeholder or more than one stakeholder? And if so, how do you balance conflicts in opinion or scheduling? Everyone who's a stakeholder makes an agreement to be present for 20 minutes a week. And I trivialize it. I go 20 minutes a week. It's, it's less than 1/120th of your entire week. It's a very small sliver of time that has this big, huge impact, psychological and practical. So you have to be there. And if stakeholders disagree, I want the teams to witness that because that's called data for the team. The team now understands, oh, the stakeholders aren't really agreeing on everything here, right? But if people are on travel or something like that, sometimes we only get one of them. Most teams only have one anyway, but if they have multiple ones, we try to get at least one present at every single meeting. T-shirt sizing. T-shirt sizing doesn't need a cost estimate. So Joe
it does.
Joe mentioned it, but look, what is T-shirt sizing really? It's relative sizing according to like whatever the small is or whatever the medium is. So here's a medium. Okay, here's this one. Is it smaller or bigger? If it's bigger, it's a large. If it's smaller, it's a small. So you don't need a cost estimate, but once you get everything ordered by size, you could start to look at it from that point of view. But now we know what's big, what's small.
I was thinking more if you had multiple teams, but I think I agree with you. Within an individual team, I don't think it's valuable to have a cost estimate. But when you're dealing with multiple teams, like I work with 10, 12, 15 teams, and they're looking off a large backlog and they're all working together, that's when T-shirt sizes become a problem because a small to one team is a small to another team. Unless you have a table that says a small is this, whatever this is, it could be money, it could be sprints, it could be
That's it.
whatever that is, everyone has to follow that because otherwise T-shirt sizes don't matter. But
Yeah.
for a single team, I agree with you 100%.
All right, cool. So we have 4 minutes, and this is where we kind of came in for a smooth landing. We give a little preview of what's coming. We twist your arm to come to the Give Thanks for Scrum event and all this kind of stuff. So how should we do this, Joe?
Yeah, so a couple of things. If you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please go to YouTube and look for Agile Boston and subscribe to it. All of these monthly meetups and also the podcasts that we do multiple times a month are all posted there. And there's a ton of good content already there. So if you haven't seen it or watched it, I highly encourage it. We have a LinkedIn channel also called Agile Boston. That's where we post updates like what's happening. Like, for example, Dan and Ann, thank you so much for being available to do this presentation because our regularly scheduled presenter, Jorge, had to move it to next month because he had something he couldn't get out of at the last second come up. So we were very agile at Agile Boston, and Ann and Dan jumped in for this presentation that they were going to do in July anyway. So that was great. We have Give Thanks for Scrum coming up, our 17th annual. Dan, can you believe it? That's the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, which I believe is November 25th. Jeff Sutherland and Dr. Jeff Sutherland, David West are already committed to doing it. We have a great design layout. We're going to have it again live in Burlington, Massachusetts at the Microsoft building, 5 Wayside Drive. And it's going to be a great interactive event. So people are going to be able to solve some really hard problems together, working together, not just sitting there listening to a person talk. And then in the afternoons, we're going to have keynotes from Jeff and Dave, and then we're going to have a Q&A session, which is our traditional thing that we do, where people can come up and ask any question they want of Jeff and Dave about anything related to Agile and Scrum. Or the cosmos, because as we know, Jeff is now expanded to the universe. So
I was about to say, I think they take questions that are outside of those guardrails.
And Dave West is the CEO of Scrum.org.
That's right. And Jeff, of course, is the founder of Scrum Inc. and Scrum at Scale and Scrum itself. So yeah, we are very happy to work with them. And we always have a few special guests that will be part of the event also, like we did last year. We had some really strong authors and presenters and keynote speakers as part of just the open space that we did last year. So it's going to be another great event.
Just want to share for those of you who weren't there, Ryan Ripley joined us virtually, and which was a new experience for us and for him, and it worked out really well, and he was able to interact and talk to people and be a part of it.
We learned a few things, so we'll be better this year. But yeah, we are going to have some remote folks as well. So it's a great event. Again, it's going to be November 25th, and tickets will be on sale soon. We'll be selling them during the summer at a very reduced cost.
And this, we have a real focus on interpersonal connection and networking this year. There's going to be lots of opportunities to meet other people, connect with them, widen your network, make friends.
Absolutely. So yeah, so all that's coming. So also, if you want to see some more content, you can go to our website, agileboston.org, and you can check out more videos there and more content there. And all of the Give Thanks for Scrum stuff will be there pretty soon as well. Plus, you can go back to past years' Give Thanks for Scrums and check out what we talked about, get the slides, get the presentations, and so forth. So that's it. We're at time. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Ann. I'm sorry I wasn't here to start the meeting, but thank you guys for being here for that.
No
Great
problem.
job. And we will see you all again really soon. Peace.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.